Hello and welcome to day 3 of Dominion Plunder previews. So Donald X says, what are we plundering anyway? We're plundering loot, so the set has some. Loot is a pile of 30 cards with 15 unique ones at 2 copies each. You shuffle it before the game, put it face down, and when something says gain a loot, you take the top one. You also have to show us all what you got. You can't just buy loot, it's not in the supply, something has to tell you to gain one. Alright, that is not too dissimilar from what I described yesterday, or at least one of the things I described yesterday, I think. And he says, let's see all 15. Well, we're only going to look at 5 of them to start with, because this image has a lot of things in it, and it's hard to fit it all on the screen. Anyway, but what he says about the loot is that, as you can see from at least these so far, your basic loot is a gold with plus buy and some other bonus, but some have no plus buy and a few aren't a gold. All right, so let's go through these. Actually, you know what? I think it's actually going to make more sense to talk about. Well, no, maybe not. I don't know. I'm trying to decide whether it makes more sense to talk about what gains loot first or what the loot is first. And I think we just want to know both things before we can really make assessments. But let's go ahead and look at these. So we start with Amphora, either now or at the start of your turn, or at the start of your next turn, +1 buy and +3 coins. Okay, so that's very simple. The barge of, I don't know, loot, I guess. That is actually compared to barge or other similar types of durations, village green and what have you. There's not going to be any real reason to work. Well, I mean, of course, this isn't its own pile, so you're not going to have so many of these that you're going to be like, oh, I'm gonna, have to worry about like duration balance and that sort of thing, or like having always having one in play, or like with barge you might you try to set it up where you're playing 3 barges and then next turning for 1 and something like that. Even if this was its own pile, you wouldn't worry about that, right? You would just you take the money when you need it and you next turn it when you don't, and that's pretty much it, right? And in that sense, this is actually really nice in my opinion, because it's always going to be there for you when you want it to. It doesn't like do things like miss turns in like non-productive ways. At the beginning of your turn, you don't necessarily know whether you're going to need to draw, start of turn cards with barge. So you make sure that you do it so that you make sure that you have a good turn and that sort of thing. But with money, I guess if you're playing with storyteller, maybe, right? Then it becomes important. But in general, like, you're going to be able to play this every turn to the extent that you care to, and then you don't have to play it that way whenever it comes up that you don't, but then the next time you'll have it again to be able to play again. So it's actually a really nice effect for what it is. I mean, who knows how good it is to be gaining these things in general at this point, but like, I like that. I like the particular ability on a treasure, just because of the timing of it. I think it works out really, really smoothly. Next up, so that one is a 7 cost. Obviously, these all have stars indicating that they're not in the supply. I don't know if there was an errata or something that removed the like italicized text at the bottom from other non-supply cards, or if loot is just doesn't have that because every loot is individually not in the supply, and that based on the keyword, or I don't know exactly how that works, but like, I'm pretty sure it still says it on horse, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Regardless, it is for other purposes a 7 cost. Whereas the next one is only a 3 cost. Figurehead gives you 3 coins, and at the start of your next turn, plus 2 cards. Okay, so this just is a duration. Oh, sorry. No. It's a 7 cost too. It's just 3 at the top is indicating how much money it has. Right. In fact, these are all 7 costs. Wow. Very prosperity, I guess. So yeah, duration draw that's non-terminal, that's actually quite good. If this was a pile, like this would compare to Den of Sin, I guess. Like you've got, Den of Sin gets gained to your hand, so that's better. But this gives you 3 coins, which is definitely not nothing. It's not a pile, and so you're not going to be able to like get a bunch of these and rely on it as like your draw. So it's going to be, more, more similar to like, I don't know, like an opportunistic like squirrel or like early enchantress or something, like, right, where it's just like, oh, it's nice that I got that this turn, but it's not like the way the structure of my deck is working, but it's still a nice effect. I could see it being actually kind of annoying in some cases. So like, unlike the Amphora, the fact that you don't have the choice about it means that if you already have enough draw and what you really want is payload, and this card is like, haha, next turn no payload for you, you're like, well, okay, thanks. But I mean, for the most part, it's going to be helpful. And generally, plus 2 cards is going to be the better part of this card. Especially since it's taking a stop card out of your deck while it's doing it. Next up, we got Jewels. 3 coins, plus 1 buy. At the start of your next turn, put this on the bottom of your deck. Okay, so this strikes me as so it's getting out of your way so that you know that you don't have to draw it until the end of your turn, which is helpful. And it's because it's doing it at the start of your next turn, it's actually getting back into your deck and thus becoming playable again immediately. So like Highwayman, right? Where, yeah, Highwayman is a duration, but you can play it every turn anyway. Jewels is the same thing. I don't know why. I don't know why it goes in the bottom of your deck rather than being discarded like Highwayman is. I think you would probably prefer for it to go in your discard pile than on the bottom, like if you had the choice. Because and like maybe the reverse for Highwayman, because like if you're doing gain and play stuff, like it's helpful not to have to draw through this. I mean, obviously you would potentially have to draw through it anyway if it was in your discard pile, but you might not. But still, I mean, the effect is pretty comparable. Well, and I guess if you get like discard attacked or something, like you're still gonna see this before the cards you discard, which may or may not be a good thing depending on what your hand was, that sort of thing. Anyway, so yeah, this is helpful. I mean, it's not like if this was a pile, I think you would be pretty happy to use it as your primary source of payload in games where like money was your primary source of payload, because it's it's giving you money and buys, and it's being helpful with respect to your deck control. I mean, you wouldn't probably be happy to gain it for 7, but presumably you won't have to here, so that's not really going to be an issue. Next up, we've got Puzzle Box. 3 coins and a buy. You may set aside a card from your hand face down, put it into your hand at the end of the turn. Oh, okay. So this is acting like save. It's a little. Oh yeah, and it's not a duration. Okay, that makes sense. So that's all upside then. pretty much. I mean, there are situations where it's not. There are situations where saving is actively, you know, not a good idea, but that's rare. You know, the vast majority of the time, you just do this, and you either, you know, you have a good card left over that you can effectively top deck, except it's better than top decking because, you know, it increases hand size, or you have like a green card that you can hold out of your shuffle, and again, you are also increasing your hand size. That's a very nice effect. Like if you compare this to Figurehead, you get one less draw, but you get control over what that card is, and you get to play the puzzle box every turn, and you get the buy. So yeah, that's very, very nice, I think. Bonus. Then we have Spell Scroll. Trash this to gain a cheaper card. If it's an action or treasure, you may play it. And it is a 7 cost. This might actually be the best one of the ones that we've seen so far. Because like this one's like, yeah, okay, screw this gold business. We're just going to give you, you know, get you your grand market or your whatever. I mean, I don't know, you know, what the timing of loot is. So like, are you going to want to gain like an altar with this, you know, or something like, you know, that you would normally want to get early? Like, I have no idea, because I have no idea whether you're going to be getting loot cards early in the game or not. But you could imagine, you know, like, oh, cool, I get to turn it into, okay, so turning it into deck control is usually not going to be that exciting, just because the innovation effect in your buy phase isn't going to do, like if you turn it into a hunting party, like, yeah, great, you gained a hunting party, that's legitimately great, but you haven't really taken advantage of the innovation effect. So like ideally you turn it into some kind of payload, like that's why I mentioned Grand Market or Altar. But you know, depending on what the loot gainers look like, gaining something that you can turn into, you know, something like a hunting party, you know, it's like gaining a changeling, except you don't actually have to have the target card in play. Although, you know, it does have to be cheaper, so you can't use it to gain a city quarter, and you can't use it to gain a scrying pool, etc., etc. But still, this one, the fact that it, you know, turns into like whatever's in the kingdom is probably gonna make it stronger than these other ones. Obviously, it's gonna be very dependent on the board, but I would lean in that direction. All right, so the next 5 start with doubloons. You know, there was a guessing game for plunder cards on Sporkle, and Jules actually was one of the cards that I got, as was Sextant, which is in this group. And I totally guessed doubloon. I didn't guess doubloons, plural. So I didn't get that. Grr. Anyway, doubloons, 3 coins. When you gain this, gain a gold. Okay, so this is... See, this one seems not so great to me. Like, sometimes this is going to be the one that you want, because you're like, I have overdraw, I need payload, give me all the cards. But often enough, like, you know, the doubloons is just a gold that comes with a second gold, and well, it's not technically just a gold, because you can, like, you know, upgrade it into province or whatever. But, you know, putting that stuff aside, cost, you know, related concerns aside, it is just a gold that comes with a gold. And like gaining 2 golds, like if you don't have, you know, if you're balancing your draw like carefully, and you don't have, you know, you've got room for 1, you don't have room for 2, or, you know, you really would like some of these other abilities, and then like this could definitely end up being disappointing. And the thing is that you're not going to have control over it. So that's the part that, you know, kind of like, you know, it's kind of like when you get your boon fishing and you end up hitting like the Mountain's Gift at the wrong time. And it's like, it's not that the Mountain's Gift abstractly is bad. And if you could choose it, like there's plenty of times you would choose it, but then like sometimes, you know, you don't want the Mountain's Gift because you don't you really don't want a gold in your deck. Like maybe there's Bandit Fort in the Kingdom or something. I don't know. Or Wall or Wolf Den. Well, these are all going to be terrible with Wolf Den, I suppose. But anyway, I mean, sometimes it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be exactly what you want. But I think if I were like, it's hard to rate power levels on these without knowing the context. But I still feel like this might be the weakest of the ones we've seen so far in the average case. Even though sometimes it's going to be the strongest, just because it's 6 coins rather than 3. Next up, we've got Hammer. 3 coins, gain a card costing up to 4. So it's a gold that's a workshop. It's a non-terminal workshop, so that's nice. It's not optional, though. And that's pretty awkward. This is, again, like, there are times when you don't want to gain any cards costing up to 4 because there's just not really anything in the kingdom that's appealing. So, like with doubloons, you get to choose whether to play this card. So, like, there's not a card costing up to 4 that's just like getting shoved into your deck without your permission. But like if you gain this because you're like, I need payload, well, like, I mean, maybe you want the silver that you can gain off of this as payload, and then that's fine. But if you don't, if you need, you wanted exactly 1 card worth of payload or something, and the only kingdom cards left costing up to 4 is like, I don't know, something bad, then you might be pretty sad. On the other hand, if you manage to find this early and there's I don't know, ironmongers to gain, villages to gain, smithies to gain, whatever, then this might be fantastic. Like, non-terminal workshop is relatively rare. Carpenter is a non-terminal workshop. What else? I mean, university, I guess, but university is like goes beyond being just that, obviously. I don't know. There's probably some other stuff, but it's a relatively rare thing. The timing on this, granted, is not as good because, as Carpenter, because you can't nearly as easily do gain and play with it. But it's still if you get this early, in general, I would say if you get this early, you're going to be pretty happy because there's usually something on the board that you would like to workshop. Like, even if it's not worth getting an early workshop to do it, there's usually something that you're happy to be workshopping early in a game. But if you get later in the game, you might be like, oh no. All right, next up is Orb. Look through your discard pile, choose 1, play an action or treasure from it, or +1 buy and +3 coins. That's cool. So this is potentially not a stop card. I mean, you do have to have something in your discard pile to play. And there might be a lot of times when that doesn't come up. But I mean, if you're playing it for a buy and 3 coins, like, okay, that's kind of the expected value that you get out of these things anyway. So that's, that's not bad. If you have other treasure gainers like Horn of Plenty, you can play those and then play this, and you can gain and play with that. So without needing to do, you don't need any of the super crazy stuff to be able to do that, right? Like you don't need Villa or Cavalry or whatever. You can, gamble. Like you can just do it by having the gainer itself. And in fact, it doesn't even need to be a treasure gainer, right? I mean, I said that because if you're drawing your deck, you're going to have an empty discard pile, but you could have drawn your deck, but only drawn your deck and gained other things with action gainers, but then play them with the orb. So this actually seems like one of the strongest ones potentially to me, just because getting to do gain and play is so nice, and it's non-terminal gain and play that doesn't rely on having enough draw to get to the specific card that you want. And sometimes that's not going to be a thing that matters, and then you will just play it for buy and 3 coins. But like often enough, I think it will be able to do something cooler than that. All right, Sextant plus 3 coins plus 1 buy. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Discard any number, put the rest back in any order. Now this is the one where, like, if you're drawing your deck, this just probably doesn't really do anything. It is Navigator, basically. I mean, it's not, because Navigator is all or nothing in terms of discarding. But, like, the Navigator has a Sextant. Like, this is definitely supposed to be Navigator flavored, like, looking at the top 5 in particular. So, you know, that's nice. Anyway, yeah, this one's, on the one hand, this one seems to me to be on the weaker side of these. On the other hand, at least, like, this, you know, it's very rarely going to be bad. And there are going to be cases where it's really nice, right? Like, you gained a bunch of horses, and then you play Sextant. Now you get to top deck a bunch of horses. That's actually really good. And will come up a decent amount because there's enough, like, horse stuff out there. You know, in general, like, you're not going to be able to time it with your, like, your buys, right? Because you're gonna have to play this before you buy anything, so you're not gonna get to, like, top deck your buys, and that is unfortunate. You know, if you have other gainers, you can end up top decking that stuff. If you, I mean, you can end up, if you have enough, like, sifting in your deck, you could end up triggering a bad shuffle with this, so that is something to watch out for. And of course, if you're not, you know, if you're not drawing your deck, if you're just, like, sort of plugging along with a non-drawing deck, then this can just be like a sifter that's setting, you know, helping you set up your next turn. So, and that's pretty nice too. So, yeah, maybe I was being a little too harsh on it. I mean, it's a pretty good ability. It's non-terminal. I mean, I think I would generally prefer, like, I think I'd probably generally prefer the, like, a bunch of the other ones even so, but, you know, it's definitely useful. Okay, Staff, 3 coins to buy. You may play an action from your hand. Okay, well, that, how often is that going to be better or worse than Orb? I mean, notably, Staff gives you the coins and buy in addition to letting you play something from your hand. So it's, I mean, it's essentially a village, and or you call it a throne variant. Like, I mean, it's not double playing it, right? But it is a card that puts another card into play. I mean, kind of like Elder, like, which is Elder is a throne variant in a sense, but of course it doesn't let you double play the card, but it sort of does. This isn't even gesturing at that, but it is. It's like the cards that put other cards into play. Like, I don't know if that's really a category, but regardless, it doesn't matter. The timing obviously on this is such that some things are going to be better than normal and some things are going to be worse. So, like, you can, you know, you will sometimes not be able to take advantage of draw cards with this, but then again, you know, if you draw any treasures, you'll be able to play them. So draw cards, you know, could be fine. Obviously, being able to, you know, play a payload card will be nice. You know, you could use this to play your, you know, your barges or your squirrels or your whatever, like, that you want to set up your next turn with. This seems pretty good. Like, the biggest downside to it is if you are just playing all of your actions before your buy phase. And I mean, if that's the case, like, well, that's not a bad position to be in. So, you know, it's probably fine. But yeah, I think this is one of the stronger ones. All right, let's look at the last 3. There's sure a lot of these. Endless Chalice. Now and at the start of each of your turns for the rest of the game, +1 coin, +1 buy. Okay, so this is the hireling for the champion treasure. Hmm. I mean, that's definitely a nice effect. I would say, depending on when you get this, like, this has got to be better than all of the ones that don't do shenanigans, provided that you get it early enough. So, like, I'm talking about, like, compared to, let me just real quick put this back up. Compared to, like, Amphora, Jewels, doubloons. I guess that's not actually so many. Well, probably Sextant. But like, you know, the ones that are basically just giving you money, as opposed to like the, you know, the ones that are doing like innovation or draw or whatever. Like if you get this late enough in the game, like it's not going to be as good. But like in general, like having, you know, this is, I mean, it's kind of like a market, right? Except that it's a market that you know that you see every turn. And getting the coins at the beginning of your turn can be like guaranteed at the beginning of your turn. Maybe, well, it's not like a Princed market because that would actually draw you to 6 cards. But like, I mean, the fact that you get the coins at the beginning of your turn guaranteed does have like a few cases where that's also helpful too. You know, Storyteller would be the obvious one. Capital City maybe. So, the I mean, I guess you could debate whether a market that you're guaranteed to see at the beginning of your turn is in fact better than like a non-terminal, like what's the generic form of Sacred Grove? I don't know that we have that actually. But a non-terminal you know, non-boon granting Sacred Grove. I guess you could argue about whether that is better or not. I think it generally is. So long as you get it early enough that you can take advantage of it across a few turns. Obviously, there are going to be situations where you have enough draw that this is actually not what you really want because it's not like dense payload. But yeah, I mean, if you get this into play early, it's just going to be really nice. Hard to compare with, you know, something like Staff or Spell Scroll, but I do think it's better than, you know, M4 or whatever. Right, Insignia, 3 coins. This turn, when you gain a card, you may put it onto your deck. Okay, so it's Royal Seal, but a gold. The problem with Royal Seal was never the fact that it top decked, right? It was the fact that it was like competing with the 5-cost slot. Insignia is not. Insignia is competing with other loot, and I would say that you know, it seems like it compares at least reasonably favorably. So not to mention it gives you an extra coin over Royal Seal. So, you know, and it might even end up being easier to get than Royal Seal. So in at least if you ignore like the distribution against the other loot and just think of it in terms of like gaining a loot, might be easier than gaining a 5. I don't know. Certainly when you take opportunity cost against the other 5s you could gain into account, it might be. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think that looks pretty good. I think it's probably going to compare favorably to Sextant. Let me just do this real quick. Just look at the other deck manipulation stuff. So it's probably going to compare favorably to Sextant, it's probably going to compare favorably to Jewels. Puzzle Box? Not sure. Prize Goat, 3 coins to buy, you may trash a card from your hand. Yeah, that makes sense. This really depends on how early you can get it. It could very easily be the best of all of them if you can get it early enough. The thing is, you're never going to be able to rely on that. But if you happen to get it early, like, man, that's fantastic. Well, unless, of course, you already invested in a trasher and have already done, you know, like you get open chapel and then you get this, like, well, okay, I can trash my chapel, and that is nice, but not probably as valuable as some of these other effects. But nonetheless, I think this should be very good, and the reasons for that should be pretty obvious. Shield, 3 coins and a buy. When another player plays an attack, you may first reveal this from your hand to be unaffected. Okay, so we got Moat that has 3 coins and a buy. You know, as much as deck control is generally like what you want for payload, I will say I think this is better than Moat. Bold statement, perhaps, but I'm gonna go with it. The value of this, of course, totally depends on whether there's any attacks in the kingdom and how rough they are. Not to mention, like, how likely you are to have it in your hand. The fact that you need to have it in your hand means, I think, in practice, it's mostly going to be one of the worst loots, just because this bonus effect is so often not going to be relevant. You're only going to have one of them in your deck, like, if you have any, like, the vast majority of the time. So, like, the odds of it being there for you are not that high. I mean, maybe you find a way to make sure that it's in your hand. That's typically probably going to result in you not actually playing it for the coins and a buy, though, which could still be worth it, but it's not really a card you want in your starting hand for any other reason, right? It's not. It's actively a stop card, and especially if you're not even playing it for the money, it's just a, like, dead weight in your hand, except for the attack blocking, which, again, I mean, that could be worth it, but I don't know. Like, it's pretty dubious, I think. So yeah, I think in practice this will not, like, there will be times when it's super clutch, but I think it's definitely one of the weakest. And then finally we have Sword. 3 coins to buy. Each other player discards down to 4 cards in hand. Yeah, that makes sense. So discards down to 4 during your buy phase. Interesting. So it does have synergy with stuff like Governor, Council Room, that draws your opponent cards. It does not so much with, like, Lost City, because you draw the cards. You're gonna play this and then you're gonna buy the Lost City and draw the cards. This, I think, is a lot better than Shield. I mean, the odds that you have the Shield are not that good. The Sword, like, you just need to draw it, right? So, like, this is the classic problem with Moat, is that even if you have Moat in the kingdom, like, often it's not actually doing work to prevent attacks, because the odds that you see the Moat are much lower than the odds that you see the attack card. Attacking is good. It's non-terminal. A non-terminal hand size attack, that's good. This card seems good. It seems like one of the best ones, honestly. Hard to say how it compares to some of the wonkier effects. I think, depending on the timing, Prize Goat should probably still be better. I think I think this should be better than almost everything else. Like Spell Scrolls, kind of, who knows? Spell Scrolls, the feast or whatever one, Changeling. But I mean, I think it's going to be better. It's going to be better than Amphora. It's going to be better than Figurehead. It's going to be better than Jewels. It's going to be better than Puzzle Box. Yeah, I think so. Doubloons, Hammer, Sextant, Orb and Staff are the two that like I could see maybe being better. Probably not. I think it'll be better than Endless Chalice, probably. Definitely better than Insignia, better than Shield. Yeah, it's going to be one of the best ones. I mean, it'll depend, of course. Like, if Militia's in the Kingdom, then, oh, this is not so exciting. If Urchin's in the Kingdom, it's definitely not exciting. But, you know, most of the time, those specific cards aren't in the Kingdom. So, it'll be good. Okay, well, that was a lot of loot. And we haven't even looked at all of the other stuff that is being revealed today. So, that includes some cards that use loot, starting with Sack of Loot. Sack of Loot just gains a loot with no hurdles beyond getting the sack. There you go, some loot. And it is a 6-cost treasure with 1 coin, 1 buy, and gain a loot. That seems pretty slow to me. Like, yeah, the loot cards, you know, are ostensibly worth 7, so like it's like a, you know, the value of the cards you're gaining is ostensibly pretty high, except I think the only reason they really are valued at 7 is so that they're valued more than gold, because they're all ostensibly better than gold. Although, are there any exceptions to that? Like, there are situationally exceptions where maybe like Hammer or Sextant could be worse than gold, I guess, but basically they're all better than gold. Or I guess the Spell Scroll could be worse than gold, maybe. I mean, you could always turn it into a gold if you want, but that's obviously worse than just having it as a gold at the moment. Anyway, so you know, I mean, gaining loot in general certainly seems good. Like, you don't always want to be doing it, but in general, I think, you know, a loot gainer is going to be stronger than a gold gainer, but 6 coins for a coin and a buy, 6 coins for a pouch is pretty oof, like, the first time that you play this. And then you have to draw and play that. You spend your 6 coins, and you have to draw and play this, and then you have to draw and play the loot before you get the actual value that you're looking for out of this. It does accumulate value over time, but, well, assuming that gaining more loot is what you want to be doing. But boy, it just seems really slow. And for a 6 cost, I don't know about that. It seems pretty weak to me. Next up, we have Pickaxe. Gives you a coin, trash a card from your hand. If it costs 3 or more, gain a loot to your hand. Okay, Pickaxe is a trasher and makes loot. If you trash a good enough card, the loot goes straight to your hand, though. Yeah, so this is a lot better. So, okay, even if you are not gaining loot with this, I mean, you still might want it. Like, as trashers go, as early game trashers go, it's not great. Like, to be clear, trashing, it is non-terminal, but you're trashing 1 card and you're getting 1 coin out of it. You can usually do better than that, right? Like, Junk Dealer will draw you a card. Forager will give you a buy. Granted, it won't always give you a coin, but it'll usually give you a coin, and it's cheaper. You know, you can open with it. Priest will give you an additional coin. You can open with it. It is terminal, but, you know, Moneylender will give you 2 extra coins. Granted, you can't trash estates. You know, Bounty Hunter will start out at least giving you a couple of extra coins. Modify will cycle. It won't give you the coin, but you can also, you know, remodel the estates if you want to. Upgrade, kind of similar deal. So, as you know, and I'm just looking at single card trashers when I talk about this. Like, obviously, if you have, like Steward or Chapel or something, those are going to be better. Masquerade, because it's drawing, like the card draws is really good, and it sometimes thins, like, maybe only temporarily, but sometimes thins like something like 1.2 cards or something, right? Is you pass an estate, you trash an estate, and you get a copper back, and that's sort of like, it's a little bit better than just thinning one card. Usually that state of affairs doesn't last very long, but I mean, if your opponent doesn't get a Masquerade, it could. Anyway, as single card trashers go, I definitely think this is on the weaker side. But it is non-terminal, and that I think is enough reason to get this if it is the best one that you've got. And it's better than Crystal Ball at trashing. Like, because it's going to always be able to target the card that you want it to target. You're not going to be able to gain loot early with this very easily. So its main, upside is not going to be there until later in the game, and it's, when exactly is it going to be there? I mean, when are you going to want to use this ability? Like, you could kind of compare it in that sense to Exorcist. Exorcist is another better single card trasher because it's easier to gain the stuff and you can open with it. But anyway, the fact that, like, with Exorcist, if you want to gain imps, let alone ghost, like, you have to start thinking about, like, do I want to trash a silver, that sort of thing. Pickaxe kind of has the same deal. It has the same threshold as as imp. The wording might be different, but it's the same threshold. And yeah, I mean, the fact that the loot goes to your hand does mean that trashing a silver to gain a loot is almost always going to be pure upside. It's more like the opportunity cost of, like, well, do I want to trash a silver instead of trashing, like, an estate or a copper? Probably not in the case of estate, but at some point you definitely would consider trashing silver instead of copper. And hey, maybe you'll get the goat, the prize goat, and then you'll get to trash your copper anyway. Who knows? So I definitely think this is a better card than Sack of Loot. Like, yeah, it's not as good at gaining loot, but, like, the trashing is, it's a 5 cost instead of a 6 cost, and it trashes. So, like, it's got to be better. Pretty nice with a silver gainer, I suppose. You can just keep turning the silvers into loot, and it's not as slow as, like, that might normally seem, because it goes to your hand. That the goes to your hand part definitely, like, significantly changes the calculus for, like, when do I want to trash something. You can just trash a gold to gain a loot, right? Like, it's worth it because, like, the loot is almost always just going to be better than the gold. So why not? So, like, you can continue to get value out of this. You can even trash a loot to gain a loot if you're like, I don't like this one. Like, I've got the prized goat. I'm done thinning. I'm going to turn it into something else. Why not? So yeah. Then we have Wealthy Village. 5 cost action. +1 card +2 actions. When you gain this, if you have at least 3 differently named treasures in play, gain a loot. Wealthy Village requires you to get a variety of treasures in play in order to get your loot. Otherwise, it's just a village for 5. Yeah, that does not seem good to me. The condition... Oh, it's when you gain this. Right. Okay. I mean, it's expensive for what is essentially a village. And not only that, like, yeah, it is a drawing village, but it is putting a stop card, like, its ability is to put a stop card into your deck. And I mean, sometimes that is what you want, but, like, if it's not, like, oh gosh, I'm paying 5 for Vanillage, like, that's pretty painful. It's going to be just, like, harder to gain it, like, you can't workshop it or whatever. And then, like, the activation condition is kind of hard to meet anyway. I mean, it is nice that. Oh, you also don't have a choice about it, like in either direction, right? You can't decline the loot. Um, it is nice that you will tend to activate this more often later in the game, and therefore like get the loot when you're more ready for it, I suppose. Although depending on your deck, like you might actually that might actually not be what you want. You might be like, I want the loot, as soon as possible. But like getting 3 differently named treasures into play is not trivial. Like you start the game with coppers, you're going to add silver. Okay. I mean, if you happen to have heirlooms, okay, great. You're probably going to be able to just do it pretty quickly. But if you don't, are you going to open? I don't know. I mean, in a plunder heavy kingdom, like maybe you're opening rope or something, and then maybe it's not so difficult to do. There's also just like an anti-synergy in terms of like I'm getting a village and a treasure. Like, what? I don't want to gain a village and a draw card or something. I don't know. It just seems like, I mean, you could think of it as like, if I can activate this, I'm getting a village and like a gold plus, which is like 9 to 10 coins of value for 5. Amazing. Except it's not really true because gold isn't really as good as like a 6. Like gold isn't like worth 6 like value wise, and the loot cards probably aren't worth 7 value wise. They might not even be worth 6 value wise. They might not. Some of them probably wouldn't be like amazing cards at 5. So, and it's not like it's bundled into one card. It is still 2 different cards, one of which is a stop card. So yeah, all in all, I think this is on the weak side. I mean, you're gonna still get it on boards where you need villages, the same way that you'll get Hunting Lodge when you're not taking advantage of Hunting Lodge's ability. Though the nice thing about Hunting Lodge is that ability like can always rescue you from, well, not that it will always succeed, but it can always try to rescue you from a bad hand. Like, they're like even on a board where you're not doing any DTX stuff, that could always still come into play. But this doesn't. Like once you've bought it for 5, it's like, okay, I'm just a village. Yeah, I definitely think it's on the weaker side as villages go. And then we've got Jeweled Egg, +1 buy, +1 coin, +1 buy. When you trash this, gain a loot. Okay. The problem with this is when are you gaining it? Why are you gaining it? I mean, there are times when you just want some plus buy, and you'll buy an herbalist for 20 coins or whatever that thing that happened. And this is better than an herbalist, but if you're gaining this in order to trash it, like that's slow. It's just kind of odd. I mean, there are going to be times when you can take pretty good advantage of this. Like you have watchtowers, you buy this, you trash it immediately, and you gain a loot. Cool. That's actually like for 2 coins. That's a good deal. That is for sure a good deal. But outside of watchtower, I mean, I guess so long as you can trash it in your action phase and you have enough draw, like it doesn't have to be that slow. Like you buy it one turn, and the next turn you trash it with your junk dealer or whatever. And then now the loot is in your discard pile and you can draw it. You still did have to draw through 2 cards though, right? So like, unless you have overdraw, it's still slow, right? You didn't get any value out of it, the turn that it was in your deck. So, I mean, I could see this being something where you take it at some point just because you want plus buy and you're planning to play it, but then like later on, like as your deck is more under control and you're ready for more payload, you're like, okay, now I'm gonna trash it and I'm gonna pick up the loot. But I don't know. It seems like the on play effect is definitely weak. It's not a card that you're going to want to gain for its on-play effect, because it doesn't. It is weaker than, like, it's weaker than Candlestick Maker, and Candlestick Maker is usually not a card you're excited to get. Like, I mean, sometimes it's nice with draw to X, but in general, or Scrying Pool or something, but in general, it's like, okay, Candlestick Maker. This is worse. Yeah, these all seem kind of weak. I mean, Pickaxe is fine. It's not it's not like great, I don't think, but it's fine. But the other three all seem pretty dubious to me. And in particular, like both Wealthy of Village and Jeweled Egg seem like they're you're not always even gonna like do the mini game and actually get the loot, which is unfortunate. Like sometimes you're just gonna like take a Wealthy Village because you need villages, and you're like, I don't care whether I get a loot or not. And it's gonna be kind of sad because it's so expensive. And sometimes you're gonna take Jeweled Egg because you need plus buy. Like, I don't have a trasher. Like, I can't trash it. Sorry. Or I just have no time to trash it because I don't have the overdraw or whatever. I don't have like a way to gain and play, and I need the plus buy every turn. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if this may not be a comprehensive list of loot gainers. I would hope that it's not. There's 30 loot cards, so to only have 4 loot gainers would be pretty disappointing. So hopefully there's some more, and there's some stronger ones coming up. But yeah, like right now I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't see myself like playing with loot all that often, just because the getting access to loot is like a little too much effort for not like enough payoff. And that's unfortunate because I think like the loot cards seem cool. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel overall about the design from a like the randomness of the design. I mean, it might be preferable to like the tournament approach of like you get to pick. Because for one thing, with so many of them, there might be some serious analysis paralysis. And for another thing, like you don't necessarily want people to have to compete to like get the one good one. It's like, oh, the only trashing in the kingdom is prize goat, so now we have to like race to get the loot. Like, although there's 2 of them, so unlike tournament, you can each get a prize goat. So maybe that wouldn't even be so bad. But the part where the analysis paralysis, I could see that being an issue. But like, I'm not always thrilled with the randomness of like boons and hexes, and I feel like this is leaning in that direction. Though the effects are more similar, so the randomization probably isn't as big of a deal. But in any case, there's just like interesting effects on those that I would like to play with, and I'm now looking at the loot gainers and I'm like, I'm not so sure how often that's actually gonna happen. Like, how often am I gonna really want Sack of Loot? Like, Sack of Loot's the card where you just like gain so many loot cards in theory, but am I gonna want a Sack of Loot? I don't know. It's really, really expensive for what it's offering, right? If you compare Sack of Loot. Let's bring this back up. If you compare Sack of Loot to other 6-cost gainers, right? Artisan and Altar. Maybe some other cards that start with A. I don't know. Those are the 2 that are coming to mind. Our Altar is a trasher, so that's great. And it gains whatever 5 cost you want. And whatever 5 cost you want is probably better than loot. Artisan also gains whatever 5 cost you want, which is also probably better than loot, and it does it during your action phase, like in a way where you can. I mean, sometimes it's hard because you need a village and it's reducing your hand size and blah blah blah. But like you can potentially like immediately like turn around and play that card, which Sack of Loot like is going to be way harder to do that with, because you're not, like as is generally the case with things that are gained during your buy phase. Like there's only a relatively limited number of things that can cause you to play those cards. And obviously alter, like it's easier to do gain and play with. Still not necessarily easy, but easier. And then Sack of Loot is non-terminal. That does matter. And it gives you a coin and a buy. Whatever. So yeah. All right. So let's move on to the final image. For the rest of the week, I'll have a mix of events and traits for the landscape. Here are today's. So we start with Peril. 2-cost event. You may trash an action card from your hand to gain a loot. Of course, events could involve loot. Peril sends someone to their certain death, but you do get the loot they were after. So that it seems to me that it's not going to be that common that you either gain action cards for the purpose of gaining a loot, or that you want to turn like most of the action cards that you do have into a loot. I mean, there's some obvious exceptions like ruins, right? If somebody's like junking you with ruins, you're like, okay, I can turn these into like these goldish cards now, thanks. So they probably shouldn't do that. And there will be times when you like have horse gainers where you're like, you have a billion horses and you're like, I don't need all these horses, but I would like some more payload. So let's turn some horses into loot. But like in terms of like the components you're gaining from the kingdom, right? Like you're unlikely, I think, to want to turn, your, most of your action cards into loot. I mean, there is something to be said for like if buys are plentiful, but money isn't so plentiful. Well, I was thinking about like, okay, you're gonna gain like Harbingers or something, some card that like really doesn't do anything of substance that you're perfectly happy to turn into a payload card. But 3 coins and a buy, and then 2 coins, another buy across 2 different turns to get that loot card is pretty slow. So maybe not even that. But I mean, there's also the things like, here's a way to get rid of your chapel type thing. So I mean, that's definitely relevant. Yeah, what other like like a 2-cost dummy would at least then be like 2 coins and a buy across, or 4 coins and 2 buys across 2 turns instead of 5, which does look a little bit more appealing. I'm trying to think of like what else would qualify. Like I guess I mean any 2-cost action really could work, but like you wouldn't probably be doing it with Border Guards, for example, because like Border Guard's a good enough card like that you're probably just gonna play it. Maybe you would do it with like Page or something once you've already got like the other stuff up the page line. I don't know. I think that that's probably just not going to be a thing very much, and you're mostly going to be doing either like the stuff with ruins, horses, trashers that you don't need. Maybe on like the last turn of the game, if you have a way to do gain and play within your buy phase, you do this with some stuff. Because depending on the nature of the gain and play, you could net money off of it. I guess you probably you wouldn't net money off it with gamble. You would realistically not net money with cavalry or villa. Like in theory you could. I mean, if you had cost reduction, or if you gained enough loot, right? If you're getting 1 coin per action trash, and then you gain enough of them and you buy a villa or a cavalry, you can net money, but not very much, and it's not really very realistic. Yeah. I don't know. This will be situationally useful. Definitely not one of the stronger events. But situationally useful to trash your chapel or whatever. All right, next up we've got Prosper 10 cost event. Gain a loot plus any number of differently named treasures. Prosper gets you a pile of treasures, or maybe just a loot and a gold. It's up to you and the board. That the problem that I anticipate with this is that if you can already hit 10 coins, you're potentially past the point where what you really want is just a ton of money in your deck. Like, the time when I want to do that is when I have like a bunch of draw and I have like 4, 5, 6 coins. I'm like, oh, I have to buy like one thing and I need to figure out like, okay, what's the fastest path to like after a donate or something, like what's the fastest path to like adding a bunch of payload. Okay, I could get this workshop, or I could get this gold gainer, or I don't know, whatever. But when I have 10 coins, I mean, granted, sometimes you don't have plus buy, and if you don't have any plus buy, loot will give you plus buy, and so, this would make a lot of sense. But if you do have plus buy, like, usually you're gonna have, like, by the time you've hit 10 coins, you've already, like, ramped payload a fair bit. I mean, not always, certainly. Like, there are going to be times when it's like you have exactly 10 coins of payload, it's slow to add more payload, and you're like, okay, give me all this stuff. Wham, I want like at least like a loot, a gold and a silver, if not like some other stuff too. Like, that will definitely happen, but I do feel like the timing on this is going to be a little bit awkward, because like if you're in that situation where it's like you don't have much payload in your deck, you've thinned down, and now you need to ramp your payload back up, you're going to have to do it with something else so that you can get to the point where you can prosper. And then in doing that, you might find that it's not worth prospering, like that's slow compared to the other options that you have. So yeah, I think like thinking about, I don't know. Well, like, what do we want? What do we want to compare this to? Like, populate certainly like comes to mind. I guess alliance too. Actually, alliance. I find to be, well, certainly much more about scoring than about adding payload, and like the payload part of it is to some extent like to counteract you being able to reliably do it, and to some extent is like a way of not overloading your deck with too much green density and like being able to still afford to do stuff. But like, alliance does add a similar amount of payload to what you would get from prosper on a kingdom that didn't have any other kingdom treasures that you specifically wanted. And it gives you 10 VP. So like, I think alliance is generally going to be better. Obviously, there are going to be times when you would much prefer prosper, but like, I think like the fact that you're sometimes buying alliance for the VP and the coins are kind of whatever. I think alliance is going to be more often purchased, more often relevant. Populate definitely seems stronger. And even populate, as exciting as it is, and as much as people, I feel like, hyped it up when that came out, I'm not like, I don't think it's quite as strong as people thought. Like, it is actually kind of slow. Because it takes a while to get to 10, and by the time you do, you already have a bunch of stuff in your deck, and then the stuff that you're getting is kind of uncontrolled, which Prosper doesn't have that problem. But I think Populate is like, it is good, and it's certainly fun. But it is like a little bit on the maybe it's not overrated. I think at least it was overrated at some point. And I think there are times when you get to the point where you can populate and you realize, okay, but it doesn't make sense to take the time to populate. It makes more sense to like just get like, I don't know, a province and a 5 cost or something, you know. And I think you're going to run into the same thing with Prosper, essentially, except that what you get out of Prosper is often going to be worse than what you get out of Populate. So I think, like, I think it's going to be on the weaker side as events go. Although events in general are very strong, so like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's weak. Period. This, I mean, it might be though. It's a little hard to say without trying it out, but it feels like the sort of thing that could be like in an awkward spot where like you want to do it and you want to do it and you want to do it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, it doesn't make sense anymore. I've definitely had that experience with Populate. So that being said, I think like Populate, it'll be fun, right? Like when you do want to buy this, it's gonna be like, oh yeah, here we go. And that'll be exciting. And you know, sometimes it'll give you like platinum, and sometimes it'll give you crown, and sometimes it'll give you you know, I don't know, bank and all kind of other stuff, and you'll be like, that will be like legitimately very powerful in some situations. But I mean, I think less often. Part of the reason I say less often than Populate is because there's more actions and more good actions than there are like treasures and good treasures. So like, you know, it's more frequently the case that what you're getting out of Populate is something that really can like charge up your deck, whereas Prosper is, you know, it's not going to be uncommon for it to just be like, oh, okay, I get a loot and a gold and a silver, and that's about it. Which is, I mean, for 10 coins, it's at least cost efficient. So like if it does end up being gain efficient as well and time efficient, like tempo efficient, however you want to put it, then it'll still be good. But yeah. Okay, finally we have the trait cheap. Cheap cards cost 1 less. Cheap is another trait, simply making a pile cheaper. This happens after setup. It can't affect what ends up being a young witch's bane or whatever. It can't affect it. It happens after setup. I don't understand the conjunction of those two things. This happens after setup. It can't affect what ends up being a young witch's bane or whatever. Does the young witch's bane not happen before, or like, okay, whatever. It's not like I will ever actually need to care about that. Yeah, so cost modifiers, not surprising to see that show up as traits. Obviously the impact this could have is like all over the place. Like sometimes it's gonna be like, oh, I can open like, you know, 2 of this amazing 4 cost card, or I can open with this 5 cost card, you know, that's now a 4 cost card. Sometimes it's gonna make your wishing wells give you points for plateau shepherds. Amazing. Sometimes it's gonna make it so that you can, you know, gain grand markets with border village, or it's gonna make it so that you can play hunting party with Band of Misfits. Sometimes it's going to make it so that Band of Misfits can't play 4 costs, and that's going to be real sad. But yeah, like, you know, it's going to change the upgrade chain or the improved chain or the governor, you know, remodel chain or whatever. Like, it's going to, so like, you know, I mean, the like obvious thing is just like, it's cheaper. Okay, I can, you know, buy it more easily. But you know, it's going to have a whole bunch of other effects too. I mean, you know, if you've played with Family of Inventors, you know, like that a lot of times what that can end up doing is messing with like all these other cards as well. I mean, there is a big difference with Family of Inventors in that they can stack. So that warping effect can really get get crazy, but even just one discount is enough to do things like now you can't remodel a 6 cost into a province. Now you can't trash this with like knights because it costs 2, like, you know, or now you can trash King's Court with knights, you know, that sort of thing. So yeah, this will just be, I mean, you know, it'll be impactful like the majority of the time. Like sometimes it's going to land on Fortune Teller and then it's not really, but like, yeah, it'll definitely have an impact. Not surprised to see it. I'm kind of expecting to see the reverse as well. Expensive as a trait, and expensive cards cost 1 more. We'll see if that actually happens, but I would not be surprised to see it happen, or I would almost be surprised not to see it happen. Especially because it's like it's an effect that we haven't seen before, and doing it through a trait seems like so like much more manageable than doing it through other mechanisms. So but we shall see next time. And Donald X says that next time will be next time, which I have to agree with. All right, well, thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for Previews Day 4. Until then.